this media briefing as partners working together in the fight against gender-based violence. The 16 Days of Activism Against Gender-Based Violence is a United Nations global campaign in all societies. South Africa was amongst the first countries to adopt this campaign and apply it in our context. This media briefing is to encourage the nation to build upon the momentum of struggles that have been waged against gender-based violence. South Africa together and across all sectors, we must unite in the spirit of Tumamina towards the total eradication of all forms of violence against. And unity is about mina, nawe, you and me. As the calendar term of the annual 16 Days of Activism Against Gender-Based Violence approaches from 25 November to 10 December, women's movement, mobilization, and activism has remained as one of the strengths of unity in action by women's organizations and those that work with women. It is only when we unite across race, class, ethnic backgrounds, sexual orientation, religious beliefs, and political parties that we can achieve the end goal of total emancipation of women. Our history of activism shows us that it was only when women were united across multiple subjective backgrounds that our struggles were advanced. We all know that in 1956, it was because women women were able to dismantle barriers that divided them and united towards a common goal, and the march bore substantive gains. Again, the institutional mechanism of the national gender machinery was a direct result of women's unity in struggle during CODESA negotiations and with the National Women's Coalition at the center. Likewise, women's gains during the Gender-Based Violence and Femicide Summit earlier this month is a more recent testament that is a show of power. And as the department, we want to acknowledge the summit and the outcomes of the summit. And the department is focusing on the outcomes of the summit so as to ensure that there is implementation. And it is important for us to mention that we are working with other departments as well as civil society organizations. Amongst others, the GBV and the summit resolved that political and community leadership must support and champion the cause of eradicating gender-based violence and femicide. The summit also resolved that political, community, family, and business leadership must be held accountable. Critically, the summit resolved for society to collectively develop and implement a targeted social behavior change program to address patriarchal values and norms and other structural drivers of gender-based violence. We call upon all the leaders of our country and different sectors to buy into the cause for the emancipation of women and the fight against violence violence against women. We call upon all South Africans to heed the United Nations theme, #HearMeToo, by breaking all forms of silence against all manners of abuses and violence against women. The #HearMeToo theme symbolizes a collective appeal to society to hear women's pain and demands against gender-based violence. #HearMeToo is also a call to action to all victims, survivors, witnesses, and all other affected to continue to speak up in any manner about or against violence perpetrated against ourselves, our loved ones, those in our care, or a stranger. It is only when we collectively speak against this scourge that we can hope to completely end it. We are bringing attention to this year's #HearMeToo theme through the robot against gender-based violence. The robot is an instant and critical determinant between healthy and unhealthy relationships. The robot is about protection and safety. It is about taking precautionary measures, asking for help, and leaving a destructive relationship. We urge all women's organizations across the country, all community activists, academics, public servants, and concerned community members to consolidate their calendars for the 16 days of activism. They must populate their diaries widely so that we can collectively contribute to sustaining the momentum of women's struggles. We also urge women's organizations to continue to build and sustain indicators so that the state does not rely on the indicators of the police department alone. We need to have the true reflection of violence against women in our country. And therefore, we must have information that is reported to NGOs so that we have the total number, so that we make sense in the hearts of all those who think that violence is not high in South Africa. We acknowledge that the national gender machinery in government cannot shift public policy agendas for women without the participation of organizations of civil society. Financing and resourcing of programs against gender-based violence is central to the achievement of our efforts. The Department of Women is leading policy advocacy for gender-responsive budgeting across all sectors. We therefore urge all members of society to consider how each of us will use their finances to contribute to women's empowerment and gender equality. The Ministry of Women has invited all pillars of the state to strengthen national efforts towards a South Africa that is free of all forms of discrimination on the basis of sex, gender, and sexual orientation. The Department of Women will be launching 16 Days of Activism campaign on Sunday, 25 November 2018 at Wanzimela Anglican Church, Kwamagwaza, in Melmoth, in King Cetshwayo District. Our calendar of events for the period include strategic dialogue sessions with boys and men, discussions with women traditional leaders, have commemorations of those who played an important role in the struggle for women's emancipation, like Charlotte Maxeke, as well as Mama Albertina Sisulu, we are celebrating this year. We will also hold discussions with the LGBTIQA+ community and launch the public hearings against all forms of gender abuses in the guise of religion and faith. Government opened a gender-based violence command center where victims of violence and those who want to speak up against a violence can call social workers. It's a 24-hour service, but also we call all civil society organizations that work with the issues focusing on advocacy, support, and many other programs that are focusing on women, as well as empowerment of women, to submit their contact numbers, and we will put their numbers in our website so that it's easy for our people to access everyone who is closer to where they stay. We've already started with community dialogues in King Cetshwayo district, where we spoke to girls from the age of 12 to 25. We know the age gap is huge, but we thought we should start at 12 because young girls start menstruating at the age of 9. But also would like to start before that period so that we instill confidence in young women. I must say that the dialogues went very well, but also they've shown that there are very low levels of debate on the issues of violence against women and the understanding of women's rights. So tomorrow or today we are mobilizing in Melmoth through the robot. On the 27th, in the Western Cape, working together with Molo Songololo, NPA, Ilitha Labantu, UNODC, SWET, Department of Rural Development and Land Reform, will be focusing on trafficking, prostitution, and drug abuse. But also what we've picked up is that trafficking has moved to rural areas. Women see their kids from the age of 13 going to town or going to entertainment, not understanding that they go to town for prostitution. So then 28th November, we'll hold a dialogue with women traditional leaders. We've also had discussions with women that are part of the traditional House of Traditional Leaders, as well as organizations of traditional leaders. So there we will try and focus on customs and traditions that are used to oppress women. We're also going to focus on the issues of traditional women and land, as well as a Muslim women's bill that court decided on, and we want to take the matter forward. We've already met with some Muslim women. 29 to 30 November, we have a summit that is focusing on gender-responsive budgeting, planning, monitoring, evaluation, and auditing, so as to ensure that each and every state department, as well as business, start focusing on the allocation and expenditure that is directed on women and women in different strata. But what is more important is to ensure that whatever a program that government is driving must find expression amongst the poor. On the 1st of December, we are joining the HIV and AIDS activities organized by the Department of Health. On the 3rd of December, it's an International Day of People with Disabilities. We have agreed to focus on mental health because we think, again, there is a lot that we have not focused on, and most people think that mental health is not a disability. But also a lot of women, more particularly young women, have been committing suicide because of a post-traumatic stress, because of rejection by their loved ones and the society, but also because we've not been able to assist victims and survivors to close the chapter of violence, and therefore it's important for us to understand why on a weekly basis young people commit suicide, why we have dysfunctional families, why do we have dysfunctional individuals that cannot move an inch. We need to understand and ensure that there is adequate attention to these challenges. On the 5th, we are launching hearings on gender-based violence. There is a team that has already started working on this, but Mandisa will continue explaining why women must have a platform where they will present their challenges. On the 6th and 7th and 8th December, we are in the Eastern Cape, firstly in Ngobo, secondly on the 7th, Queenstown, where we will have a memorial lecture, but in the mornings we will start with Tumamina. And then on the 8th, we will be in Fort Beaufort, where Charlotte Maxeke was born. And then we will have, on the 9th, dialogues with men and boys. And this will be a mass event that will be giving men an opportunity to say what their challenges are. But also we want them to commit to working together with us in fighting violence against women and children. And then on the 10th, it's the International Human Rights Day. In the morning, we will focus on launching the flower that has been named after Masisulu, which is at Walter Sisulu Botanical Gardens, and it is only found in that place. We found ways of making a flower relevant, because at all times when people speak about useless women, or when they want to judge women, they say, this one is a flower. But we've seen leaders that have spoken about the flower and the struggle for women's emancipation. For instance, Oliver Tambo spoke about flowers of the revolution. And also we have Mao Zedong, who spoke about letting the 100 flowers bloom, but that was about the debate for the party. But he spoke about the flower, which means that a flower is a good symbol, but it has been attached to women when people want to say women or call them useless or want to label them. We also have read Charlotte Matlege's speeches, where she raises the importance of the protection of young women, and she equates them to flowers and the future. And therefore, young women, girls, are the future. Thank you, Chairperson. I will allow all panel members to make additions.
Thank you very much, Minister. Shall we start with... okay, can we start that side? And may I also acknowledge the presence of Archbishop Nkosi. Thank you for joining us. Yes.
Well, there you have it. It's a month-long event. Sunday, November the 25th marks the beginning of the 16 days of activism.
Greetings, everyone, in the name of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. I am happy about the statement, especially about the men and boys. Is it fine? It's not this one. Hello. Yes, especially about the men and boys. Because most of the time when we do our events, we only talk to women. It's only women, and men, they are not there. We just talk about them. So I think it is a good initiative that they come together and they discuss their challenges, and maybe we understand the cause of violence, the gender-based violence. So I support it. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. From the National Heritage Council of South Africa, we so thrilled by the manner in which the minister has outlined the program. June 16, of 16 days of no violence against women and children, women. As the Research Council, we think that, first of all, the minister has adopted a very activist approach in dealing with these matters ever since she started. I think for the first time we've seen the mobilization of society outside a boardroom. remember in various sessions where we have been involved as well, in the broad spectrum of society. I think for the first time, because this issue now is just beyond an academic, classroom approach, to mobilize society in its entirety, traditional leaders, this department, the youth, the intergenerational dialogues that we have seen. And I think it's very much encouraging, because I think it's a very important paradigm that we, as the Research Council, we were noting. And then secondly, the whole struggle, against discrimination of women. It's a societal, struggle. We think that the whole issue of, patriarchy in society is also a historic one, and colonialism at its own effect. So until you deal with those issues in society, which does not just need one body, I mean, the Ministry of Women can only sound the warning, but also lead. But people have got to support that, to change that paradigm. And then lastly, from the Research Council, we think that when we're talking about decolonization of our heritage, we also talk about the manner in which culture has been, used or abused. Myself, I'm a product of Roman Dutch law, where, the whole subject called, African culture was viewed in a particular way, taught in a particular way. It therefore means that the judiciary itself is not immune from this, because if the judiciary, even the lawyers, the judges themselves, are part of a Roman Dutch law system that they studied at school, it therefore means that that's one area. That's why, for instance, the whole issues of marriages, the whole issues of customary law, the whole issues of has got to be put in the microscope in this exercise. Because our children, for instance, if they see everything called African culture as taboo, they will then think that they're not proud to become Africans. And therefore, it's important in the decolonization to look at that. So if I'm happy about the ministry, which has actually, the manner in which has actually dealt with that. And next year, we hope that in developing our program of action, we'll work with the Department of Women as the Research Council, more especially looking at the issue of decolonization of our heritage, the manner in which certain things have been done. We know the miniskirt debate, where a young woman was chased in a taxi rank because people justified that on culture, which was really, it was exactly what I call a narrow and then a criminal element of, showing patriarchy, which should not be actually be taken as African culture. Why? It is because of those distortions that there's no way in African society that will actually be justified. And therefore saying that there's a discourse that the Minister of Women has touched on this, something that we've not been dealing with in society. All of us to tackle this, and we're joining hands with this, and we congratulate the Minister for really a step in the right direction, and we support the statement.
Thank you very much. Decolonization of heritage, activist government led by the Minister, working in collaboration with civil society. The chief ministers of TDP. Can we ask Minister Dlamini to say a few words from Dlamini?
Thank you very much. As a little Abantu, we are very happy to be here and also to see the minister involving civil society. Sometimes programs do happen without civil society, and we're happy that all civil society is involved in this program, and we support this program. And one of the things that we cannot deny is that we live in a patriarchal society. And also, we cannot forget where we come from. when you think of the abuse that has been done by the previous regime, where our women themselves were raped by the police. Until today, those women are sitting with their wounds. While we are looking at GPV of what is happening today, forgetting what has been caused before, and our women who were victims or survivors of violence against the regime. The minister mentioned that the minister will be organizing hearings for women. We'll be looking at women who were victims of abuse during apartheid times, where some of our women were raped during 1960. And those women are 70-year-olds now who are carrying those wounds. And some of them never told anyone of what happened to them. And as a country, we left that as if nothing happened. And those things keep on carrying now. And we keep on asking ourselves, what is happening in South Africa today, forgetting this thing has started long time ago. Our mothers were victims, our children are victims, and we were also victims of the previous regime. So when it comes to hearings, we want those women to come out to talk about what happened to them. Not to say we want to hear, but also as a healing thing for them, because we need to heal the country. Also, when the minister mentioned the dialogue about men and boys, we need to understand why our men, where do they get this anger? Where does this anger comes from? Because all of a sudden, our boys, our men, they carry this anger, that in order for them to heal or whatever, I don't know how to mention it, they kill. And there is no way during 2018 we could still talk about gender-based violence. We could still say South Africa is on the rise when it comes to violence against women. Our children are being murdered, and our system minister is letting us down. And now, if we want to do justice, we want men to talk as well. What went wrong? We need them to tell us. Is it because of this democracy that they feel threatened by women who are being empowered, or what is happening? Also looking at the issues of a girl child, where our children now, are using the blessers. It's men who are becoming blessers. Is it also because they're angry, so they are taking it out to our children? These are things that we need to find out, because we all have boy children. We need to bring up our boys to be men, and our children needs role models. And if our husbands or our fathers are not role models to our children, then we're having problems. Also, one of the thing the minister mentioned, working with the churches, that is the crucial one. We have seen what has been happening. It's not only happening in one church. There are other churches that now things are coming up. People are talking about what is happening in churches. And it's one of the issues, as Ilita as well, Minister, we are having a summit in Gugulethu with ministers of religion, where we're bringing them on board to say, talk, what is happening in your churches? What role can you as leaders of the churches can do in order to empower your congregation to fight the issue of violence against women? Lastly, Ilita Labantu will having a big march on the 30th, Take Back the Night. This is our 21st annual event, where we are reclaiming the night in Gugulethu, saying, enough is enough, hear me too, and justice for me too, where we are saying to women and the community of Gugulethu, come up in numbers and support us to reclaim the night, to say enough is enough. A lot of things are happening in the townships, but you'll never see them on the media because they are not selling the media, and it's happening in the township. So we are calling people to come in their numbers, men, women, children, to say enough is enough. Let's reclaim our night. It belongs to women and children as well. We need a free society where we could walk at night without any fears. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. From
Thank you very much. Do I have to present this? Yeah. No, it's not. Let me see. It's not. Yeah, it's not. Let me try this.
It's working.
It's working.
Oh, yeah, yeah. Thank you. Thank you very much. I thought it's sabotage. Honorable Minister, I must say, really, as the Progressive Women's Movement, I want to echo the voice to say women really appreciate what we are doing to ensure that you work in partnership. Earlier this year, we also attended a report in Cape Town when you were reporting to civil society about what had happened at the UN during the previous convention on the status of women. It might sound like a regular routine work, but for civil society, it's the acknowledgement of of hard work they do behind the scenes with very limited support. Just a word about the Progressive Women's Movement. It was really formed behind the struggles of women that the minister has referred to, dating back to the Women's Coalition of 1954, the FETRO in the 80s, and the work of Mayor Charlotte Maxeke in the early 1900s, that women have to be mobilized, even the Women's Coalition. So at the end of that mission, people said, let's form the Progressive Women's Movement. And it has 5 thematic areas. I will just say, Minister, this one in particular, gender-based violence, is already one of the thematic areas that our women are mobilizing around at a community level. You will remember the case of Oscar Pistorius, which really attracted the whole world. One of our women, literally, and a few others, were supported to stay there and support the family throughout, to a point where when the family formed the foundation, they wrote to Progressive Women's Movement and said, we want one of your women to be part of a River Foreman Foundation. So we are fully behind the program because that's a top priority for us. With the chosen areas, I really appreciate that you are looking also at professionals, because, you know, this kind of work, it goes with a lot of pain and emotions that are not spoken about easily. You don't meet a woman along the street or at the mall and she says, you know, you wouldn't meet a woman who would say, I was beaten throughout the night, or I've been raped so many times. It's a pain that is hidden in a woman's heart and a woman's mind. So the call that you are making, I will definitely make sure on our side is progressive, that at a local level where we work, we identify specialized professionals like psychiatrists and psychologists and make sure that they become part of our teams. Our women are very good at going to court and protesting and saying this one mustn't get bail, but the victim suffers the consequences beyond a protest. So we will pay particular attention to this. And the other area that I think I saw in your program, that on the 29 to 30, you talk to gender responsive planning budgeting. I think for us, it's something very, very important, because our thematic areas, as PWMA say, we look at gender-based violence, but also we look at the total picture of a woman. Why are women trapped in this social ill? Irrespective of what the Constitution promised and all the laws that has been passed by government, Domestic Violence Act, Sexual Offences Act, all the acts that are out there. And so the question of women having the kind of budget that will empower women towards contributing to the GDP, the skills for the economy, independence, and all the things that will make them to be able to say no and walk away and don't look back to say, oh, where am I going to sleep with my children? We are looking for a total liberation. We want to claim our freedom in a sustainable way in this era where even President Ramaphosa is making a huge promise to South Africa that we will get investors to this country. We will include people in the economy. We will have the YES program where young people are employed. And for us, really, the question of women is more urgent than yesterday, that they are not left behind in all this, so that come 2030, when we look at the evaluation of sustainable development goals, women are found to be able to participate in all activities that guarantees their freedom. We really appreciate this. We will follow through and we will make sure our women participate as much as they can. Thank you, Minister.
Thank you very much, Prof.
Well, thank you so much. Minister, we come from the Commission for Gender Equality. I mean, and we want to, in very clear terms, support the 16 days. Even those that are cynical among us, what we tend to miss, Minister, is that if we don't support the 16 days, and we're saying that it's talk shop, we denigrate it, the fundamental question is, what do we then do? Is it okay to look the other way, fold your arms and do nothing? Now, the hashtag #MeToo speaks directly to what is, in fact, at the core of our problem to stop violence against women, which is silence. Until, as a country, we deal with silence, the hashtag #MeToo, Minister, it's at the core of those that are at the cold face of violence, and they are women. At the cold face of violence, they are women. Statistics bear this out. Now, when I mean, the Hear Me Too hashtag Hear Me Too, in fact, it confirms that we're a global village. We are part and parcel of the global citizenry. That South Africa is not an island sufficient unto itself. What the Commission for Gender Equality, Chapter 9 institution acknowledges that your leadership, Minister, will make sure that, religious leaders, imagine what would happen, Minister, if on a Friday the Imam stands up at the mosque and say that hashtag Hear Me Too, the Friday prayers. Imagine what would happen at the synagogue. So that there is this, we should in fact make it clear that issues of violence are not peculiar to the Christian community, that they cut across. That you go to, if you go to Shembe, you must also go to the synagogue. You must also go to the mosque, so that on a Friday prayer, that the Imam then says that loudly, that these hashtag Hear Me Too, in fact, affects Muslim women, affects Muslim men, because, Minister, what kills South Africa is the level of silence. Silence that is promoted by religion, culture. So all of us in this room, in the world, what disables us is how we have normalized, how we have institutionalized violence as a way of life. And hashtag Hear Me Too seeks to go to, in fact, what is the problem? And the problem is that all of us must speak out. The minister or this government will not sort out violence against women on its own. So all of us must ensure that this ministry is supported, is capacitated, because when this ministry fails, all of us fail. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. And let's then turn to Reporting Tower.
As a South African liaison office, we'll also like to commend the work that has been done by the Department of Women and the work that the minister has been doing in terms of being visible on the ground out there, interacting with the society at large. The unity amongst us as South Africans to fight gender-based violence, it is important because it cuts across all races. It does not have color. Yes, in the main, most women who are affected are women who are financially not stable, who can provide for themselves. But also we must not forget that even women who are financially stable do also go through gender-based violence. So we must look at it from all angles. We know the perpetrators. We stay with them. They're our brothers, our uncles, our fathers, our cousins. We've got a responsibility also as South Africans to unite and make sure that we do also report our loved ones when we know that they are abusing their partners, because we can't just keep quiet and turn a blind eye when we know that our own brothers and cousins and uncles are also abusers within the community or within the family itself. Because these incidents, they take place in our homes, and government does not stay with us. We are there every day within our homes. We need to also revive the spirit of Ubuntu moving forward, because Ubuntu, that means humility, caring for each other, loving for each other. And that's one of the things that in terms of Tumamina that we should also work towards. We must also lastly remember that a boy child is not born violent, but is programmed as they grow up. So that foundation is very important that we need to also look at. Thank you.
Thank you very much to the panelists. There we have a number of issues around not just the 16 days, but gender-based violence. Many women and girls in our society face unspeakable horrors on a daily basis. The roots of gender-based violence stem way back to colonialism and apartheid. It still lives with us. That pain, as was said, that pain still lives in our society today. So the 16 days focusing on, breaking the silence, around issues of not just government but society as a whole. And also we say that, and as said at the summit, gender-based violence, the solutions are multi-sectoral. It's not just about safety, it's also economic empowerment. It's also about our norms and values in our society. So let's open it up to discussion and questions from the floor. I'm told that Cape Town is also somewhere. I'm not sure how I will know that they are there, but Kadiri will assist. Are they here? Okay. Oh, okay. So, thanks. I can hear your voice. So just speak when you need to. In fact, let's just start with Cape Town. Is that fine?
Oh, I was just about to say we don't have any journalists in Cape Town this morning.
Oh, okay.
So there will be no questions from Cape Town.
All right. Thank you very much. Can we have questions from the floor here then? No,
Good morning, Minister and the panel. Sorry, it's not a question, it's a clarification kind of a question. Minister, you spoke about the hearings that are going to be on, very soon. But I missed the point when will those hearings be conducted, and whether they are going to be a national kind of hearings or they are going to be regional. I just wanted to know the date and the venues where the hearings will be conducted, and what will be the behind what is it that you want to achieve?
Any other questions? Kindly introduce yourself.
Sandra here from
Eyewitness News. Minister, you spoke about everyone working together, at least the panel, everyone working together to fight gender-based violence. It's not only the government that will stop this thing, but there are two departments within government that are letting a lot of women down, mainly the police and the justice department. We have women who go to police stations who are re-victimized. They can't, report what happened to them. There's a judiciary who is letting people go who have been, perpetrators. Are you guys pushing maybe for legislation that will keep perpetrators of gender-based violence, spend more time in jail, harsher sentences against people who abuse women, against people who, murderers? That's my question.
Thanks, Sandra. Any other arguments? From Japan Breaking News. Minister, are there any plans to extend this type of activism beyond 16 days? Because South Africans have often called for it to be more than just 16 days. Not as, we do this for 16 days, but you as citizens carry on for 365 days, but formally introduce it as a campaign for that time. And my second question is with regards to the robot. A lot of activists have called out the fact that it again centers telling women what to do and how to be cautious and doesn't call on perpetrators to be accountable. Is it still a good idea to promote this robot? Will we see any other forms of gender-based violence being reflected in a robot that is similar? That's my two questions for now.
Thank you. Should we take those?
Thank you very much. Firstly, the hearings. I think Mandisa was very clear on why we should have hearings. Firstly, our history, where we come from, a violent society where death is taken as something that is normal, where people die and we just continue as if nothing has happened, where workplaces, you have workplaces where women are killed and no action is taken, where women are violated and no action is taken. When everything that is being created to create a more space for women and make life easy for women is turned against women, and it works against women. Look at women being given the right to go to court and present their story. There is secondary victimization there. And there are three elements or people that are important there. The prosecutor, those that defend perpetrators, the judge. In the case of Cheryl, you have also seen racism creeping in, saying other people here are not bright, they don't have minds, I'm going to think for them. You've heard cases or questions about the centimeters being asked, and you look at a young woman who has been contemplating and gathering strength over a period of years, and she goes to court. And you hear the society saying, but why was she not speaking all along? And is that a normal society? But in her evidence, Cheryl says the police, magistrates, and others go to the church of that priest, and some of them would take out their jackets and drape them on the floor so that he walks on them. They report cases, and they are not taken seriously. And we don't even ask the question, why was the priest arrested in PE? It's because no action was taken where he worked. And unfortunately for him, he went to PE, and it's a PE police that had to act. That is abnormality. You can't have the whole system rejecting to take up the issues of women because they have their own interests, but also going back to fighting a patriarchy, that we have a bigger struggle of fighting patriarchy. And we need to make sense to South Africans. All those that work with women, NPA, Justice Department, the police, health, social development, and even us as the department must go there and hear the real storyline of a South African woman, because it looks as if up until we give that opportunity, we will not move forward. But also, Mandisa did say that women have been quiet. 1960s, you had women that were raped, abused. Cases were not reported. It's a part of the healing process. The Cultural Heritage Board and its structures must be part of the hearings, so that they not only hear from stories that are told by some people there, they must hear women talking to them. And therefore, we will not have anyone who would say, no, I didn't know. Even the review that has not been taking place for so long, legislation about sex workers, issues of Muslim marriages that have taken so long, must find expression within this process, so that everyone sees that there is agency. It looks like we are all walking slow and thinking that things will just vanish. And the spirit of Ubuntu, we have lost that. We are known about the spirit of Ubuntu as South Africa, but you don't see it in action. So let women tell their story. And we are not competing with anyone, but this is one part of a country that has not gone through a healing process. And if we want to start with that healing process, let's look at those that are at the cold face of violence, as Mbuyiselo has said. So we are going to call all the people that are supposed to ensure that there is change in the quality of lives of our people. But also, the society, its role is very huge in violence. And each and every one of us, Mina, Nawe, we must stand up and not look at our boyfriends killing our children. Not hide that our boyfriends rape our children. Our cousins, our brothers, let's provide a space for breaking the silence and letting everyone coming up and talk. Let there be a national discourse on violence against women. I want to make an example, yes, about the dialogues we had in Kwaka. Advocate Mangocho was there. We were shocked. Men, there were more than 5,000 men there. Almost all of them went out of the tent. And we had to say to them, please come back. Come, let's have a discussion. What are you afraid of? Is it because you always run away when it's difficult? Is it because you are part of these people that are abusing women? Or you are afraid this might happen to your own wife and to your own daughter? And if you want us to work together and deal with the issue, come back. We have to wait for them and beg and plead with them to come back. And they went out when women, young women, were making presentations about their life stories. That is when fathers and young men ran out of the tent. They did not, I think they did not have an option to leave because they came with our transport there. If they had an option to leave, they would have left the whole process. And that shows that we have not arrived home. And 365 days, there is a campaign on 365 days. But I think what we need to do is to have a theme. That is what we have committed to as the department, having a theme for each month. Because if we say just 365 days, and not come up with programs for everyone, our program will not make an impact. For instance, December, we're focusing on HIV and AIDS, focusing on International Day of People with Disabilities. We're also focusing on International Day of Human Rights. And we would need to try and ensure that next December, we focus squarely on that in terms of the services that are provided to these sectors, in terms of the law and its application and implementation. The robot, I think right now, we've all been saying when a woman is abused and for instance, you get the protection order, most of the time it's the woman that leaves the house. But also, women stay in abusive relationships. And we need to, whilst saying things must change, we must empower our young women, ordinary people. A young woman in King Pechwai around Mbangen who said, I like being twalad. You need to make sense to that young woman who does not yet understand abuse. And when she is asked, why do you support that? She says, because you get or you get married. And that says that in the mind of that young woman, marriage is a priority, but not education. And therefore, you need to also make sense to her because she has internalized the system and chosen a life that will make her better. We must also not forget that there is poverty in South Africa. And therefore, women will always look at issues according to what is at their disposal. So the report is there. It's about the protection of women, and internationally, no one has stopped coming up with programs to protect women, because our role is to continue with the campaign, upscale on our methods of a campaign, and on the other hand, have or look into legislation. No country has stopped a campaign fighting violence against women, and no country has stopped having a lifeline or child line or the command center. No country has stopped doing that, and we are part of the global village. And we must be realistic and not oppose things that are going to leave us with a big hole that will not be able to close. But also, instead of punching holes in the programs of other people, we need to complement programs. Come up with suggestions so that we become stronger. If there is anything I've left out, I will ask that my colleagues respond to those.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Minister. Just a quick one. I think it was Tando who raised it. You know, this issue of other government departments. I mean, civil society often feel let down by critical government departments when it comes to this issue. The few years ago, the government came up with Tutuzela centers, which is a very, very important critical concept, because that's where doctors, nurses, police, prosecutors could ensure that our cases go through. Not what we have today, where we have the kind of statistics where half the time we are talking about the statistics emanating from a few cases that went to court, the majority of them having not gone beyond a police file. So, Minister, maybe it's important to really look at gains that we've made and make sure that you evaluate impact and push for expansion. Because if in our communities we had more Tutuzela centers, by now the model would have matured. We would be tackling the perpetrators head on, instead of continuing with a system where they know that the police file will disappear or the statement won't be taken properly. The initiative was excellent. All what we need is to make sure that it's constantly evaluated,
in partnership with civil society and expanded to the most remote rural areas. And the Sexual Offences Act, Minister, and the courts. I remember at one point, we were looking at this to say, where are these courts? Because the more we have them, the better at a local level. And again, it's a question of evaluating impact and expanding them. Because, we have long-term goals, but immediately what will send a clear message to perpetrators is the success rate of prosecution and conviction. While we are looking at developmental aspects, skilling, this and this, and so also then of course it's important to realize that people need to be trained. This is a specialized area, and sometimes people will take a young police and give quick training and expect that person to be on top of such a complex agenda of understanding the dynamics of victimization. And today, hence there's a backlash. In some police station, you find that men, they run there first after beating up a woman and report a case. And the police will run after a woman. And actually, a woman will have to go for bail midnight. When men have not been going to bail for bail at midnight, the police will just think you are crazy to report your husbands. So there's also a backlash. There's a lot, Minister, that needs to be done through the criminal justice system as well, so as to assist you to make a breakthrough in all what you are doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Prof.
Thank you, Minister. I think one of the things that we're missing, in the olden days, we used to have court assessors. I think we need to bring back that, where you find civil society sitting in the courts, assisting the judges. I don't know what happened to that. That was one of the initiatives that came with the late former Minister Dala Omar and Dr. Manto Shabalala. And that used to work. We don't know what happened to it, but it used to work for us. And the issue of training civil servants, all of them need to be trained, not only police. We need to look at the attitudes of nurses, how they are ill-treating our own people in those hospitals. You go to courts, you look at the clerks, how they abusing our own survivors. Who goes to court? They think, sometimes, Minister, you go to those courts, you sit. I'll talk about one court, the Philippi court, where Ilita Labantu is involved. You find that the clerks, they become magistrates themselves. They will tell you, the people who assist with interdicts are not here, so come tomorrow. As an organization that is based at the Philippi court, we don't get funding to do the work, but we do it because we felt there was a need. So if we're not there, no cases. People are not getting their interdicts because people are not there to assist survivors with their forms. So the attitudes and the behaviors needs to be taken up, because we could come up with all these activities, but if we don't look at how our people are being trained, how the police are being trained, has it changed like in the previous years? And you look at the police themselves, they don't take the issue of violence against women serious. You go to police stations, you find that even the way they write the statements is not what you want them to write. I remember there was a time when I said to them, why don't you let her write the statement herself, because she knows what she's talking about. And when we look at the way she wrote, the police wrote the statement, it was a totally different thing. So now it goes back to the training of those police. I think also the language that we use. We always say to young girls, don't walk at night, you'll be raped. What are we saying to perpetrators? To answer your question, we need the language and the message to perpetrators. Instead of us saying to our girls, don't wear a short skirt, you'll be raped. Don't do this, this will happen to you. What messages are we sending to a young boy, to a perpetrator? I think that also we need to change how we view our own children as well. Coming to the issue of the hearings, the minister did mention that it's about time we need healing, we need closures. And if you look at what happened in 1960, 1976, 1985, those were crucial years in South Africa. And we never talked about those things. Yes, the TRC was there, it happened. But what happened to that mother who was raped in 1976, who's got a child of a perpetrator? We never talked about it. How are we going to heal the country now? The mother of who's 78 is looking at her child, is saying, it happened to me, my daughter. It's happening to my grandchild now. Because the mother, the grandmother, didn't have that closure that it happened to me. Now she's seeing it, it's happening again. And as a country, we don't talk about it. I think when the minister said we need healing, it's about time that we also start our healing processes. And I think the minister mentioned that she will conduct all these hearings in all the 9 provinces, working with civil society in those provinces to assist, particularly organizations who are working on the ground on these issues of GBV. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mandisa. I think I'm just going to start wrapping up. I don't know if, because of time, I'll allow advocates and then can we ask Minister to do the closing. We also need to share with other provinces.
Yeah, it's also a very small thing from myself. On the public hearings, we're already part of the public hearings at the National Heritage Council, and we think that these public hearings are very much important because this is a struggle, to end power relations in society that are skewed towards men, and of course to deal with triple oppression that we've now dealt with race, but there's still class and gender. And it is very much important that these public hearings are important. Then 3, the issue of Ubuntu that the minister has spoken about. The Heritage Council, we have been calling on even on changing the Nelson Mandela Day to Ubuntu Day. But of course, we were debated by this to say that it's already part of UN. You can't change it. Because if you want to infuse that, to say that, days like those, because you can't just, say, as one person was saying, I mean, Nelson Mandela, that 7 minutes, it must speak of these issues, because that's Ubuntu that the minister was talking about. Ubuntu must be part of that. What has happened to Ubuntu Betu, as Archbishop Tutu asked, when things have happened and things have gone astray in our society. So I'm welcoming that, and the Heritage Council will participate fully on those, and again revive the claim on Ubuntu and the call that we're making on this Ubuntu, that let's move away from just calling Ubuntu, using cliches, Ubuntu Gabantu, into actual program, not just government of society that must speak to, how we behave as society, on Ubuntu, on xenophobia, on many things that are spoken about. And lastly, research. We hope that we're saying in this Research Council, sometimes we're poor in research. And our poverty on research makes us to have wrong diagnosis and wrong outcomes. Yesterday we've said xenophobia is caused by Africans hating our other, and that changed at later stage to say that, by the way, there's some naughtiness up in the African brothers and sisters. So once you don't have a proper research, your diagnosis is going to be wrong. Remember, without diagnosis, there's no prognosis. And therefore, those are things that I think the two could go hand in hand. And we hope that research institutes must actually come so that we actually come up with the correct diagnosis, so that we must now come up with the right solutions. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Over to Minister. Closing remarks.
Thank you very much, Annette, colleagues, and members of the media for coming or attending. And we hope you are going to be with us throughout this process. And we hope that women in media must also have their theme on issues of patriarchy as well as violence. And we are going to work together in dealing with various sectors. I agree, for instance, with Advocate Mangojwa that our research arm, and we have a strong research institutes in South Africa, but I don't think we are using them positively. For instance, the issue of healing, we have sat with psychologists, had a discussion, talk about the things we see, but also about their experiences. And we are very adamant that this process will bring about a change, and it should be handled with care, and it should not open more scars, but it should be a process of closing the scars. And we must try and ensure that we rally everyone behind it, and also saying that social or the Department of Women will be at the center does not mean that the hearings will be conducted by us. We also want to sit on the sidelines and have people that are going to be listening, so that we learn as the department and strengthen our wills. And the case of Cheryl has shown us a lot. We've learned a lot out of it. And it's one case that Cheryl and other young girls and boys, it has shown us actually the negatives of witness protection. Everyone talks about witness protection, but we then realize that witness protection is like a one-size-fits-all program. It's not for a young girl who wants to go after court hearings, go to write exams. And therefore, there are many other lessons we are learning on a daily basis, and that just attending cases is not enough. The discussions you have with elite women who do not want to live abusive relationships because they are holding on material things, and trying to say it's better to be free than to have everything in your presence. Those are important things we have to focus on. And lastly, when we talk about non-sexism, we must have a clear understanding that this is part of our struggle. And there must be an understanding that we have not even scratched the surface.
when it comes to fighting patriarchy. And therefore, we need to understand that we are still in the struggle. And we need to understand that we are going to join other formations worldwide, like the Women's World March that focuses on inclusive programs, but also focuses on inclusivity and also ensure that rural women and girls are not left out of the programs. And by 2030, when the SDGs are reviewed, we must be one of the countries that would have made a huge difference in the quality of lives of our women and the girl child. Thank you.
Thank you very much to the Minister and to the panelists, as well as to the media and other guests that are here. The fact that I'm sitting there, you can see that there are many, many other presentations, and we look forward to also working with each other, including the media, in ensuring that the issue of women and gender-based violence is at the center of public discourse and that we have tangible changes in our society. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you.
Can we send it to sorry to do this, but after let me just please. They said they
It's better if I get it, even if I take it.
yes, oh, thank you. Because, I mean, so we had